Welcome to The Third Story. I'm Leo Sidran. Once again, no script, off the chest, just here with you, sharing a few conversations and a few thoughts. Before we get started, I want you to hear this.
There will be no love that's dying here with me.
That's Cecile McLaurin-Salvant and Sullivan Fortner doing a live stream concert last night, Wednesday night, on Facebook and Instagram. In fact, I spent a little bit of time yesterday just scrolling pretty quickly through my own Instagram and Facebook feeds just to see music that was either happening in that very moment or that had been posted within, the previous few hours, and found a wonderful assortment of music happening practically in that moment that was being shared in an effort to foster creativity, expression, community, connection. I mean, that's kind of what's happening, and it's beautiful. People are stepping up and just making stuff, just doing stuff, just being together in various online platforms. My friend Alexis Cuadrado, for example, has been hosting an afternoon listening session on Facebook where he brings a handful of people together on a Zoom call, and they just listen to music and talk about it. There's a lot of potential here. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. If you have a social media account, I'm sure you've been experiencing something similar. The essential premise of today's episode is to explore the theater community and the effect of the COVID-19 experience on the theater community in New York, on Broadway. That was my premise. That was the conceit when I set out to do these conversations. And so I first called my friend Andre DeShields. He's been a guest on the podcast before. I've worked with him over the years on his own musical theater projects. And earlier this year, he received a Tony Award, long overdue and well-earned Tony Award for his work in the hit Broadway musical Hadestown. So I called Andre to check in with him and see how he was feeling right now. And then I spoke to Dale Franzen. She's a producer on Hadestown and also a kind of thought leader in the world of theater and the creative arts. After that, I reached out to a couple of other friends. Another friend of the podcast and good friend to me, Michael Thurber. He writes music for theater. He's also performed in Broadway pits and generally has his fingers both on the pulse and in the pies of various creative and musical universes. I then spoke to my friend Shelley Williams, who's a musical theater director based in Brooklyn, also the mother to two friends of my daughters, and we talked about how she's approaching this experience. And finally, I talked to my pal Rob Jost. He plays bass in the musical Dear Evan Hansen, and he gave me a sense of what it's like from the pit musician's perspective right now. What I felt in these conversations was that for the most part, they were incredibly big picture, very global, and really brought up questions that are much bigger than Broadway and theater. It makes me wonder if theater people are just tougher. And something about the experience of working in theater opens one up to a flexibility and creativity in the way one thinks. Or if I just happen to be catching these people this week and this is what we're thinking about because we have a lot of time to think. In any case, these conversations go deep and they, I think, are curious and profound. There are some ideas that reveal themselves in these conversations today that I have really been chewing on for the last couple of days. Andre DeShields, for example, says, the world is not over, but the world as we know it may be. And Dale Franzen says, a crisis is really an opportunity. Michael Thurber says, the intense pressure to create is becoming part of the already noisy background that most artists have to confront every day. All three of these feel right to me. Before I play these conversations, I want to take you on a little audio journey. You'll hear from Cecile McLaurin-Salvant and Sullivan Fortner, Martín Leitón in Barcelona, Doug Womble and Morgan James in Harlem, Dan Zanes in Baltimore, Louis Cato in Brooklyn, Pasquale Grasso in New York, Victoria Canal in Amsterdam, Trevor Exter in New York, Ben Wendell in Brooklyn. Incidentally, he's also the son of one of my guests, Dale Franzen. Michael League in the south of Spain, Peter Himmelman on the Upper West Side, and some kids I'd never heard of before singing a song called Please Stay Home. I think they're in Barcelona. I found them on the internet. I love them. I'll post links to all of them in the show notes so you can follow them too and see what they continue to put out in these trying times. Third-story.com is the place to go to sign up, subscribe, get involved, check out the archive, and hear the first installment of the COVID Chronicles. And patreon.com/thirdstorypodcast is the place that you can go to help keep the lights on and support this ongoing project. Let's check in with Cecile McLaurin-Salvant and Sullivan Fortner in their house concert from last night.
Why should a fella want a girl like her, a frail and fluffy beauty? Why can't a fella ever once prefer a solid girl like me? She's a frothy little bubble with a frilly kind of air, and with very little trouble I could pull out all her hair. Oh, why should a fella want a girl like her, a girl who's so unusual? Why can't a fella ever once prefer a usual?
Tú eres bonita y graciosa, tu inteligencia cautiva, te hace ver tan atractiva y linda eres como una diosa. Más tu inocencia alevosa, planta cara a la de un niño, y aunque siento gran cariño, me preocupa que el ladrón con cara de bonachón te engañe como a un chiquillo. Con cara de bonachón te engañé como a un chiquillo.
I live a lonely avenue. My little boy didn't say I do. I feel so sad and blue, and baby, it's all because of you. I could cry, I could cry, I could cry. I could die, I could die, I could die. I live a lonely avenue.
I've been down
It's 6 o'clock. This must be Leo Sidra.
Andre DeShields. I couldn't help but thinking of you as soon as I heard that they shuttered all the theaters, because this has been such a crazy year for you. It's been such a big year for you in so many ways. And all of a sudden, as if it wasn't already in kind of an unusual and spectacular year, it comes to a screeching halt in an unusual and somewhat spectacular way.
But here's the story. I had been for 4 days in Delray Beach and Aventura, Florida, doing the gig that I opened the Lincoln Center American Songbook series with. So I took part of my vacation time from Haiti Sound to go down south. I was gone for 4 days, the 8th through the 12th. I returned on the 12th to go back into the show. I arrived at the theater to the news that the show had been shut down. So my response to my colleagues at the Walter Kerr was, I go away for 4 days and you can't keep the show running? At the same time, I worked not only above and beyond the contract that I had signed, but I worked harder than even I thought I could.
Yeah.
Through the entire year of 2019.
Yeah.
With 1 day off the entire year. And that day was April 18th. And because of how Broadway shows are put together, when you go into your tech week, there are no days off. So the day after you open is your day off. And that was my sister's birthday. So I went to Baltimore to make sure that she knew she was loved. And so I consider this the universe conspiring to give me a little chill, silly time. I can catch up on all the tasks that I've neglected for a year.
I hear what you're saying, that this is the universe conspiring to give you a little breathing room. And I have thought about you so many times because I have seen you on TV and I've seen you all over the place. And I've been thinking, man, I mean, it is so physically demanding. The show itself is physically demanding. And the idea that you would be doing anything above and beyond that, I honestly, I can't imagine what your life has been like. Nonetheless, as somebody who has devoted so much of your life to the theater, what are you thinking when you see what your brothers and sisters in the theater community are going through right now? Or what does it mean to you to see Broadway dark for a questionable amount of time?
It hasn't been a week yet. So I'm thinking in terms of that, because Broadway went dark for a week after 9/11. And that was the first time that I experienced a kind of mass fear, mass hysteria in the arts community, because we are the stalwarts, we are the thoroughbreds, we are the healers, the keepers of the flame, etc. Now, you know that I am a man of philosophy. So I'm not stressed, I'm not depressed, I'm not responding to this moratorium as a curse. The big picture is that this visitation we're having from the coronavirus is global. The shutting down of Broadway is just a piece of the puzzle. This is a shutting down of everything humanity has done for the past 5,000 years. It's time for the zeitgeist to change remarkably, measurably. And the only way it was going to happen, since we, humanity, were not making it our responsibility, the universe had to put both its feet up our asses.
1 foot wouldn't do it. We needed both of them.
No, both of them, yes. From a personal point of view, I look at this as an inconvenience, a huge, an egregious inconvenience. But it's an inconvenience that will not respond to conventional wisdom. It's an inconvenience that asks for penitence, repentance on the part of humanity.
Mm-hmm.
We claim to be woke, but we're not. We've raped Mother Earth
Mm-hmm.
long enough,
Mm-hmm.
and we've had any number of warnings that the result would be dire. But we've gone our merry way, accumulating.
Yeah.
I'm trying to use terms that have epic
Mm-hmm.
resonance.
Because this is epic.
Because it is epic, yeah. So, what's the term? Lucre, which has the sense of dirty money.
Yeah.
We've been happy to collect that and to ignore the spirit of Mother Earth. So now we are being tested epically.
Mm-hmm.
And even with this battle royale against the coronavirus, we still are thinking too narrowly, with still thinking too small.
Mm-hmm.
We're only thinking about our physiological immune system. What are we calling it now? Social distancing, right? Keep 3 to 4 feet between you and the next person. No groups of people more than 10. But what about our emotional immunity?
Mm-hmm.
What about our mental immunity? What about our spiritual immunity? No one's talking about that. What about the immunity that's going to take us into the 22nd century? No one is even mentioning the 22nd century as if Armageddon has already happened and we're speaking from our graves. So I believe that somewhere there is value to this experience we are going through.
Mm-hmm.
We simply have to be calm. We have to be chill. We have to be introspective sufficiently to understand what the value is. The person, the individual whom I have heard get closest to it is Bernie Sanders. Only because, and he's not even close, but he's closer than anyone else I've heard speak, only because he talks about democratic socialism, which frightens a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
But that's because we are now reacting with fear to everything.
Mm-hmm.
But Bernie is not a Marxist.
Mm-hmm.
Bernie Sanders is not a Maoist. But what I think he means, and would be much more easily embraced by the ordinary civilian, is take what you need and give what you can.
Yep.
That's the empathetic heart of socialism. That's what we say in Hadestown. It comes out of the mouth of the babe Orpheus. He says, if no one takes too much, there will always be enough. But the history of mankind is taking too much and blaming it on the false god inadequacy, insufficiency, lack, when there is no such thing as lack or inadequacy or insufficiency. It's because we hoard. It's because we're so damn greedy and don't know the first lesson about if you share, there will be greater abundance.
Mm-hmm.
These are the lessons that I think we ought to be learning now, which is why the universe put the brakes on.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to shut you the fuck down until you learn how to coexist. Not only with your neighbor, not only with one another, but with me, the cosmos, the ether that each of you carries in your own soul. How does Joni Mitchell put it? We are stardust. We are golden. We are 100 million year old carbon, and we've got to get ourselves back to the garden. That's what we have to learn, how to get back to the garden and live there. Your
ability to immediately identify this as a cosmic problem, as a universal problem, as a human question of humanity, gives me a sense that on some basic level, you are not surprised by what's happening.
Not surprised at all. As a matter of fact, my colleagues are saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry your show is closed." And my response is, "I'm not sorry." And then, of course, this shock is visible on their face,
Mm-hmm.
to the point that they don't even ask
Why?
why. Right? They just go. First they're catatonic, and then they go about their church mouse ways. No, I'm not surprised, and I'm not distressed.
I wonder if your reaction would be any different if you hadn't just come off of this intense year that you came off of, because this is a very high year for you. Obviously, your response is a much deeper, more long-term view, a long view of the thing. But do you think that your perspective is at all influenced or affected by the last year?
Yes, definitely. I've been a performing artist for 50 years, professionally for 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
And during those 50 years, I have diligently, and in some sense, with a great deal of hubris, sown my seeds.
Mm.
My covenant with the universe was not if, but when you decide to share your abundance, your cornucopia with me, I will be ready. Not if, but when. And not when the abundance comes in torrents. I'll say, wait a minute, I have to get ready.
Mm-hmm.
I will be ready.
Yes.
I had no idea it was going to be 2019, but it was 2019, and I was ready. And it challenged me to the core of my being. There were many times that I thought, how can I go on?
Mm-hmm.
But of course, the answer was, I must go on, because these blessings have my name written upon them.
Mm.
I must receive them. Again, the lesson we learn is that the promise isn't that your blessing is going to be soft or light or easily received. Many times in my life, but particularly in 2019, I went back to the Hebrew Scriptures, because those founding fathers, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
we're always talking about the founding fathers and the spirit of the Constitution. But let's get real about this. The true founding fathers are the people who gave us the laws by which to live,
Mm-hmm.
not the laws by which to, through violence,
Mm-hmm.
steal sovereignty from another group of people.
Mm-hmm.
But the Hebrew founding fathers received blessings that were always hard won, that were always hard scrabble. So I realized that every blessing I received in the form of awards,
Mm-hmm.
rewards, accolades,
Notoriety.
right, fame, was, on the flip side, an investigation in whether or not I had chinks in my armor. So when I came back from Florida, I was getting off the airplane and going to the theater to go into the show.
Yeah.
I wasn't coming home for a day of rest. And my prayer was, Holy Spirit, divine intelligence, spaceship Mother Earth, give me the strength to do the show tonight. I arrived at the theater, greeted by my production stage manager saying, there is no show tonight.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said to you, I joked, what, I was away for 4 days and you can't keep the show running? And the response was, no, the show is closed.
Mm-hmm.
So in my active silence, I thanked the Creator.
It's such a mix of emotion I feel in you telling this story, you know. But the thing I wanted to say is, when I saw you in Hadestown last year, the same thing that you describe about making sure that when you were called, you were ready, that is what I felt, because of course you and I spent some time together a few years before this experience, and I always felt that you were ready. I mean, you were living as though the gig was coming tomorrow. And in order to keep those chops in shape, you had to just assume that you were going to get called to battle at any moment and be prepared. And when I saw you on stage doing it, I thought, well, the only way that you would have been able to do this is by making sure that you were prepared for, like, living as if it were coming at any moment.
is there any other way to live, Leo? I know people make other choices, but really, is there any other way to live? Then the battle is now. I'm a stargazer. I think I must have said that to you, or you might have guessed it.
Mm-hmm.
I gaze at the stars, although the first and only science for me is the architecture of the cosmos.
Mm-hmm.
That's how we learn to coexist with the earth and ultimately subdue it. It's Plato's Republic.
Mm-hmm.
You know that, right?
Yes.
Once we stopped looking at the shadow
Mm-hmm.
and started looking at the light, we then could anticipate activity. We then could invent a future because we could see the light the second, third, fourth, and fifth times,
Mm-hmm.
and then start to plan.
Mm-hmm. Predict,
things.
yeah.
Predict, thank you. That constancy still exists, but we think we made it. We think it comes from us, but it doesn't. It comes from a system of powers much greater than we are. But we no longer know humility.
Mm-hmm.
We no longer know contrition. We no longer know empathy. I don't think this is Armageddon. I don't think the world is coming to an end, unless we want to talk about the world as we know it.
Mm.
That's definitely coming to an end.
Mm-hmm.
But there shall be a new earth. Those who cannot dream of it, cannot see it, will not be around
Mm-hmm.
to coexist on it.
You've talked for years about breaking the Methuselah code.
Yeah, I still talk about it.
How does that square with, I mean, for you personally, you know, I mean, are you scared? Does it scare you?
No, I'm not scared. Nothing comes out of acting in fear except greater fear.
Mm-hmm.
In the concerts that I just finished doing in Florida, which were distillations of the concert I did at Lincoln Center,
Mm-hmm.
which was an act of cannibalism on my part because I took 3 concerts that I had done before, including Confessions of a DIMP,
Mm-hmm.
and put something together that would resonate for the kind body politic. So you are an influencer in what I am currently doing because I spent so much time in your aura and a lot of it rubbed off on me.
Oh, come on.
You think I'm blowing smoke up your ass?
I mean, I have a hard time hearing it, but I'll take it.
Yeah, take it.
I'll take it.
Because it is true. I say that because every concert changed depending upon the personality that the audience brought into the venue.
Mm-hmm.
So that the last concert I did, and I always do Dating in Armageddon, which most people refer to as the AIDS monologue.
Mm-hmm.
How does everyone get it? The way we all get it. Ignorance, silence, and it's free.
Mm-hmm.
I end the concert with LOVE. Do you remember LOVE?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I end the concert with LOVE. But before I do LOVE, between Dating in Armageddon and doing LOVE, I say, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the coronavirus.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not trying to frighten you. I'm not trying to scare you. And I'm saying this because you brought that term up. I'm not trying to I'm talking to the audience, and I'm not trying to frighten you. I'm not trying to scare you. I am, however, trying to prepare you for the next mountain that we have to climb. And I did the concert in thirds, and I actually used the information from my Tony speech.
Mm-hmm.
I did, after the first 3 numbers, which were all up-tempo and loud and smiling and gregarious, I said, cardinal rule number 1, surround yourself with people whose eyes light up when they see you coming.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you just did for me. I'm talking to the audience.
Yep.
Thank you for that. So by the time I get to the 3rd section, and I'm talking about mountains, I say, this is the peak of a mountain.
Mm-hmm.
Don't spend so much time on it. Look up and see the bottom of the next one that we must, I said ascend, but in the Tony speech I said climb.
Yeah.
The only way you can get from this peak to the next is using the tool of LOVE. And that was my cue to say to the orchestra,
let's go.
Give me a beat.
Yeah.
And I went into the song. So that's what I believe.
Yes.
The top of one mountain is the bottom of the next. Here we are at the top of a mountain.
Yes.
And everyone's looking down and in fear. Oh, we're so high. As opposed to looking up and saying we have a long way to go.
Andre, thank you as always for your wisdom and your philosophy and your time.
I love you.
I love you too.
Please stay home. Don't want me corona. Please stay home. Oh my, please stay home. Please stay home.
Hi, Dale Franzen. My question is less specific, although I suppose when we talk about general, you're going to answer specific to Hadestown. When I see Broadway go totally dark for an unknown amount of time, one just wonders, what does that even mean to shut it down in a way that it really hasn't been shut down before?
I mean, I guess we all have to get in touch with historical longevity, I guess is what I would say. For instance, I've been taking comfort in the writings of Yuval Harari,
Mm-hmm.
who wrote that book, 21 Questions for the 21st Century.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at the long line of history and the Black Plague and World War I, and then on top of World War I, influenza, no modern science, no internet. I mean, I think we have to look at the very positive things that we have, which is we are able to stay home and still communicate. We have advanced medical,
Mm-hmm.
ability point in the 21st century. I mean, we are in a much better shape than 100 years ago if this had happened. And I believe this will also be a great wake-up lesson, which is that we need to get ready. We need to be prepared. People in general, my experience is that very few people are preventative. Very few people actually do prepare for a rainy day or actually take care of their health ahead of time rather than wait till they get a serious illness. I mean, I think this is an example of we've gotten a serious illness and we should have been more prepared. And there are many other countries that are more prepared that are much smaller than ours. I mean, Korea is more prepared. You know, this is shocking and not okay for the United States to not be in better shape. But there's no point in dwelling on that right now. We just need to change that. And we need to get ahead of this tsunami. So in terms of Broadway, I don't look at it just as Broadway because, I mean, this is affecting every single person in every sector of our planet. You know, every single person is affected by this. So we're in it together. We're gonna rise together or we're gonna fall together. And I believe that we'll rise. And Broadway is one of the most resilient and passionate parts of the universe. We will be back. We will be stronger than ever. I fully believe that even greater art will come out of this. I mean, it's one of the greatest communities on the planet. So I think there's no question that we will get through it and we will surprise everybody in a sense. But nevertheless, right now, we have to deal with many immediate concerns and nobody knows exactly what that means yet. We're still trying to sort all that out.
You know, I just think about those who, you know, have not, as you say, prepared for the rainy day.
Or could not prepare for the rainy day.
Exactly.
You know, didn't have the capacity. I mean, I think three words that come to mind that I read a couple of days ago: adapt, overcome, and improvise.
Mm-hmm.
This is what we all have to do right now.
Yes.
We have to look at our own little universe and adapt,
Yes.
which may mean cutting budgets, cutting out all non-essentials,
Yes.
doing whatever we need to do in our own little universe. Then we need to overcome this, not let ourselves get depressed because that's not going to help.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was joking to an artist friend just recently in the last couple hours, and I said, you don't have time to have depression right now. There's
Yes.
no time for that. So put that off.
Yes.
You know, you can do that later. And then finally, we have to improvise. We have to think about thank God we have the internet. So many musicians need to move online, move to streaming. It may be that Broadway needs to move to streaming. I mean, it's like, thank God we even have that option. But, we have to think through, people are still going to need to be uplifted. They're still going to want community. And if the only way to do it is through the internet, then we need to figure out how we're going to do that. I know a lot of musicians, without naming names, who are already looking into many different ways to do that on a very large scale. And I think that's what we need. I mean, we need the arts more than ever, and we must take care of our artists, and we must advocate to the government to help, just as small business is going to need help. I mean, a lot of people are going to need help.
You say we need the arts more than ever, and I can't help but think that this is among all of the other opportunities to sort of revisit how we as a society look at ourselves. I think this is a chance to look at how we see the arts and how we value the arts. What do you think the role is of the arts in a time of crisis like this?
Well, I mean, throughout history, in the time of crisis, somebody just told me that Shakespeare was more prolific during the plague than at any other time because he had to stay home, right? He was staying home. So I think during a time of crisis, the one maybe good thing about this situation is people need to go inward and they need to do some deep thinking. And I think most of us are so busy and distracted and outwardly focused. This is a time where you don't have a choice. You're going to have to be inwardly focused. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. A lot of people will make new decisions. A lot of businesses will go under. A lot of businesses will change. A lot of people will have to... I just heard a story of a couple who in New York, she has a 2-year-old, she's pregnant. They just made the decision to go home to Australia for the next 5 months. There'll be a lot of decisions like that. We have to adapt. And sometimes the adapting will be horrendous and terrible and difficult. Sometimes it may ultimately end up being a better thing. We don't know yet. We don't know the end of the story yet. We don't know where we're going to land. The most important thing I think the arts can do right now is to keep our spirits up. And there's so many ways to keep your spirit up. I mean, I've been listening a lot to Bryn Terfel singing W.B. Yeats songs and listening to Debussy, listening to Beethoven's Ninth, listening to Hamilton, listening to Hadestown, listening to things that lift your spirits. I think do that. Do things that lift your spirits, because that's really what the arts is for me. The arts is transcendency and illumination, and we need a lot of that right now. Not just watching, Netflix, but doing things that lift you, lift you up. I was just thinking about how a lot of people who are used to going to church every Sunday won't be able to go to church or synagogue. Where are they going to find that spiritual lift? I mean, the arts is where you can find it. I sort of feel like I'm always quoting Winston Churchill, who is my hero, who went through the darkest times that this country and the whole world has ever gone through. And he continued to say, I am an optimist. What other choice do I have? So I don't think it's productive to get depressed and go to doomsday and go to conspiracy theory and go to any of these really dark places. I think we have to stay focused right now. And things are changing really fast, so we have to be alert. I was just talking to my own family and saying every day needs to start with doing something for your health, whether that's taking a walk or doing an online yoga class or meditating or whatever it is that you need to do to get yourself in a healthy place. I mean, that's something we have to do right now. We can't just succumb to watching the news 24 hours a day.
When you quote Winston Churchill as being an eternal optimist, it sounds like a lot of the skills that are useful as a producer are useful in crisis of any kind, right?
Totally.
Accepting whatever the new reality is and going from there.
Well, and in fact, a lot of people say a crisis is an opportunity. And I think that's a better way to look at it. This is not something that I would ever have wanted or dreamed of, but, it's here. I have to deal with it. We have a show and lots of people that we care about and want to. You asked about the role of the artist. I mean, the most important thing to me in the world is the role of the artist and the role of creative storytelling. So, yes, we have a huge responsibility, and we're going to have to figure out how to get through this. I just don't know how at this exact moment. I'm sorry I can't give you more information.
Thanks, Dale. Be well.
We'll talk to you soon.
Okay,
Bye.
thanks. Bye-bye.
Well, me say one, say two, say three. Yo dica, quédate a casa, me say, stay at home, quédate a casa, diga, stay at home. Lávate las con jabón, lávate las manos con jabón. Obligates, toca toda precaución. Do all we together in a one action. When Michael really day upon the convenience.
Michael Thurber, 4 days ago when I started thinking about doing interviews and conversations with the creative class, with musicians, with theater people, whatever, it was like, in an effort to show how vulnerable creative people are and how close to the edge they live, and how, you know, if you shut down all performances, like that basically just completely wipes out an entire sector of the population. But between my initial thought and today, it's like, well, we're just the tip of the iceberg, man. It extends so far beyond the creative class now. It extends into such a huge part of the country that our little story is only a tiny fraction of what's happening.
And I'm worried about us, but honestly, I'm way more worried about poor folks.
Yep.
Like, you know, not to say that we aren't essentially poor folks too in the creative class, but it's like, I don't know, man. I just, like, whatever. I feel like we're going to figure it out. It's people that really don't have opportunities, like, and are in real poverty, that this is super scary for, I think, you know?
So, man, okay, so tell me about your last handful of days. You went down to Kentucky with Tessa. You were supposed to do a show.
Yeah, so we were supposed to play in South Carolina, and this was on Friday. So we went down there, and already a lot of our stuff had been canceled. So we were assuming that was going to get canceled too. But we, you know, the morning of the day we were supposed to fly out, it was still on. So we got down there, and right up until Friday morning, the show was still on because there had been no cases down there, and it was like, let's continue. But that was the day after stuff started to get really serious, and like Broadway had closed down, and you know, like some of the big golf tournaments had been canceled, and that was when the switch had kind of been flipped nationally. And so the morning of the concert, they were like, we're going to do a live stream instead. So we did this live stream concert with Sam Ryder and the Human Hands and Tessa and I. It was like a double bill, and it was actually really cool. We all just sat on the stage together, which was under 10 people. So we're not breaking the law. Yeah. And just played like a round robin style, where we would play a tune and then they would play a tune, and we went back and forth and just sort of talked and played. But then what happened was New York was looking really crazy and really uncertain. And so we figured, man, if we're already out of the city and we don't know what's going to happen with airports or whatever, we were like, maybe we'll just stay out of the city. Tessa's family lives in Kentucky, and that's only 7 hours away from where we were in South Carolina. So we grabbed a rental car, went to Kentucky. So we were there for a couple days. And then just yesterday, you know, I mean, even in that 36 or 40 hours that we were in Kentucky, New York just shut down so much more, and the whole national situation got more intense, as we all know. So then we started to think, man, it's very likely that domestic travel bans are about to happen. And I had gotten a few emails for a few organizations and educational institutions that I work for that was saying there's a serious murmur of domestic travel restrictions in the next 48 hours. So that's, of course, totally unqualified. That's not like a fact, but I figure if these folks are hearing what they're calling serious murmurs, that's probably pretty legit. And also it just makes a lot of sense, especially in a city like New York. So we just thought, you know, originally we thought being a couple weeks out of New York would be ideal because we could let things settle down and have some family time, and that would be great. But now we're thinking if this could be a couple months of, you know, social distancing or whatnot, then we want to be back home, because we got our home studio there, and most importantly, all of our friends and like our community. It felt sort of weird being away from New York, which is probably foolish because New York is such a vulnerable place with the amount of people. Like if anything serious happens, it's really difficult to get in and out of. Our electricity is vulnerable, like all of those things. But that's where we live and that's our life. And so we just sort of thought, man, we should get back. So we're actually in a rental car right now driving back, which seems to be really safe because, you know, at a rental car location, there's never more than like two people. And then you're sitting in the car by yourself and the car has been Lysoled and bleached to high hell.
Right.
So it seems pretty safe. So we're driving back right now, and we're just going to go right into our apartment and close the door, and we'll be there.
You two have a really unusual and special setup also in that you're both creators, you're both musicians.
We're super, super blessed. We're really lucky in that way. We're also really lucky that between the two of us, our career is very diversified. I mean, Tessa is mostly performing live.
Yep.
But there are other elements to what she does. And for me, I have a lot of different opportunities creatively and artistically, but also monetarily. And so it's really a blessing because I can stay home, and there are things for me to do at home. And I do have a studio in my house, as you know. And so we're really lucky, and we play with each other. And so we can have that sort of outlet to just express with somebody other than just ourselves. As most musicians and artists are doing, I mean, it's definitely a good time to kind of hunker down. It's a really scary time, of course, and we don't know how long this is going to last. But I really, really am so excited to see the art landscape after this, because people are going to be coming out with fire, like people, all those things that all these artists have wanted to do, like, oh man, like I need to be shedding this scale, or oh man, I've always wanted to write that album, or like it's all going to happen right now. And so I feel like in 6 months or 3 months or a year, or, you know, whenever we make it out of this and stuff opens back up, the art is going to be better than it's ever been. It's going to be incredible. Yeah. That to me is like something that's the light at the end of the tunnel. That's really inspiring, you know?
And what do you see among your friends who don't have such a diversification in their career, who don't necessarily have the kind of optimism that you do about surviving the next, 6 months or whatever it is? Like, you said to me in a text message the other day that the art world is just already turned upside down.
Yeah, well, I think it's really particularly scary for, I do a lot of stuff in theater, and again, I mean, I'm lucky, like I have a musical that I wrote that's going into production next year. And so as of now, we're all still thinking that that's going to happen, but we don't know for sure, of course. But, in the immediate future, I mean, like I was going to write the music for Shakespeare in the Park this summer for Richard II, and we don't know if that's happening. And a lot of my closest friends are theater directors and sound designers and fellow composers and actors. And we all, I mean, all of these productions are just getting canceled left and right. And so for folks like that, where their whole craft is exclusively live and mostly, other than Broadway, exclusively non-for-profit, funded through donation and grant and endowments and stuff, I mean, that's a really vulnerable position to be in. And so that's another reason that I want to be back in New York, is that I want to be in communication with those people and be around those people and be available, just if nothing else, just to talk to folks and just check in and make sure people are okay. But yeah, I mean, I think on the theater front, I was talking to my agent just yesterday, and nobody really knows for sure what's going on. Nobody has an answer because the world doesn't have an answer. We don't know how long this is going to last. But for the time being, I mean, everybody is doing, just one day at a time, waiting and seeing what's going to happen. I think, if you were just to really look at it and break it down, even if this all ended in the 8 weeks that, on paper we're sort of going by right now, it's like an 8-week closure of things. Even if it were to end in that amount of time, which from the epidemiologists I've listened to is not likely. It's much more likely that it's going to be 3 to 6 months. But again, if it were to end in 8 weeks, it would be probably Christmas before the theater industry would actually start to look normal again, just because of the massive hit that everybody's taken financially, and also because of the backlog of productions. Like, there's going to be so much figuring out of, like, are we going to reschedule the productions that were supposed to happen in the spring and then push all of the future plans back so that there's like a 6-month push back to everything? Or are we just going to say sorry to those productions and move on with what we had originally scheduled for next year? Those questions are all going to have to be answered, in addition to the financial hit. So I think when you factor all that together, it would probably be like, and again, I mean, this is not based on any hard numbers or anything, but I can't imagine it would be settled before, Christmas or something.
Yeah.
And again, that would be if this all wraps up in like 2 months. So I don't really know what's going to happen on the theater front, but I think on the music front, a lot of people that made their income playing live, financially, it's very scary to suddenly not have that. But at least artistically, there's like a clean outlet. Like you can just start recording or open your phone and, you can still do your thing, I guess is what I'm saying, even though the financial part of it is going to be really difficult and scary. But like theater folks, you can't really do your thing on the phone or in a live stream. Some shows might work that way, but by and large, it's a live thing, so it definitely is a little trickier.
I've been kind of exploring that space between creation and connection and monetization and opportunity, and my sense of it is that this is not the time to be talking about money in the creative world because everybody's hurting and feeling the squeeze. And so, yeah, this is our time to be real creative. And on the other hand, I guess I can afford to feel that way for a little while. And so it's easier for me to say that, but that's my thought too, is like what people are clearly craving is connection and expression. And, the one thing that we have is, these tools, Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and FaceTime and, all of the technology to stay connected. I've been on 2 Zoom calls in the last 24 hours. I'd never done
me too.
Never done a Zoom meeting until yesterday,
Yeah, we did a couple of my NYU classes via Zoom, and it was actually really cool. It worked.
It's cool. It is cool.
Yeah.
And weirdly, I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed by the amount of communication that I'm receiving from people and that I'm even starting to initiate with people. And I'm feeling like I've probably been spending easily a couple hours a day on the phone with people just checking in, which I wouldn't normally do. I mean, this is more connection with people and people I haven't talked to in a long time than I would do on a normal non-corona day.
Man, see, so there you go. Look, I agree. And I think that is a potentially really beautiful thing. I mean, this is scary. It's really scary. Me and all the other people I talk to, it's like it goes in waves. Like in some, like maybe once a day or at a certain point in the day, you go down that black hole where you're like, oh my God, like, is the world seriously ending or something? Yeah. But by and large, like, I think that this is also, there's going to be a lot of great things that'll happen, hopefully. And I think that's one of them for sure. Yeah. That's been my experience too, as far as the communication is concerned. The other thing too is like, I like what you said about like, you're reaching out to people and it's like very direct. That's sort of the balance that I'm trying to strike. And Tessa and I have talked about this a lot in the last couple of days. Like there's a lot of people have reached out to us about doing live stream concerts and all this stuff. And I think that's a really great way to stay connected and to do your thing. I'm also really going slowly with it all because I don't want this to turn into a thing. I mean, I'm only speaking for myself, but I don't want to see like this be a thing where artists kind of get back on their BS and we're trying to like capitalize on like a moment of like spreading love and light. And it's like, we're like trying to sell our stuff on, like, I mean, if that's actually helping people financially, then that's a beautiful thing. But it's like, social media is also a very noisy place already, and it got so noisy. It just got so noisy. I mean, that's it's the so thing. And I worry about that for our mental state, like, because even if everybody's on there in their best interest and we're just being nice and stuff, it's still just a lot. It's a lot of noise. It's a lot of voices, and part of me is like what you're saying is like really focusing on personal connections, like calling people that you haven't talked to in a while, setting up your own Zooms. Yeah. And, if there's a time to do that publicly with live streaming, like I think both Tessa and I will do a little bit of that in the coming weeks. And that could be really fun and awesome. So I'm not saying that's bad, but I'm going gently with it because I want to make sure that like we all stay healthy and that we're not just like pumping stuff into the social media system again. Right. Yeah, no, completely. And also, I'm sort of divided about it because I'm so glad that we can stay connected and that we can share our experiences with our networks and publicly if we want to or privately or whatever. And just for the mental health of everybody, stay connected. And I also am, frankly, kind of excited about quieting down. I mean, I'm hoping that after this week, things do kind of quiet down in my life a little bit and I can actually just slow down my kind of input and
hear what's happening inside my own head. I am snapped into action yesterday, day one of, Soul being home from school and everything. And I shaved my beard, and it was
that clean Corona look.
Yeah, that clean Corona look. And it was kind of cathartic. I mean, first of all, it was like a statement of, okay, this is different now. My face is going to be different. My life is going to be different. But also, there's something beautiful about just taking like a nice long shave and like, I don't have anywhere to go, so I'm going to shave my face. I'm not in a hurry.
Yeah, man. That's the thing to do. Slow it down. I think you're right. It's like when in the world are we ever going to have another time? This could be the only time. It certainly is the only time so far in my life where the whole world is stopping.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's such a huge opportunity, like emotionally and spiritually to take advantage of. And so, again, I feel like maybe that's what I'm saying with the social media stuff. It's not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's like there's a real opportunity to kind of go inward.
Yeah.
And to really pause, and like we could actually come out of this as a world and as a nation deeply refreshed, like in a deeply meaningful way.
Totally. And what's funny is like, as we're talking about it, I realize that I have been feeling a little bit of this, like, because I know that there's opportunity. I mean, not opportunity financially, but like, I know that there's creative opportunity here. And so immediately I get in my head thinking, man, I got to think of some really creative shit to do right now with this like internet connectivity and all this stuff, which is the wrong way to think about it. Like, this is the time to remove all that kind of pressure.
That's what we're trying to do. Yeah. And I think but I am very much at the beginning of this. It's like, that's how I feel right now. I don't want this to just be yet a new opportunity where artists start to feel competitive and I start to feel anxiety and pressure to create. I do not want this to be that. But at the same time, we're only a week into this, and in 4 weeks in, maybe it's going to be at the point where we all do want to be doing this, and it's not going to feel like that. It's going to feel very genuine and beautiful, you know?
I don't think you come back the same again. And the fact is, it forces us to remember that like the world that we've been living in is not the only version of the planet. And we've been saying this our whole lives. Like, we could do better. We can do better than this. Do we actually get a chance to like do better? Maybe.
Figure that out.
Maybe.
Yeah, I think we will. I really do. And I think, we got to just all wade into this together. And there's no hurry. Like there's no hurry to figure this out. Like there's no emergency there is medically, but artistically, it's like, I think we all really need to like just wade into this together. It's not a race. It's like we all need to just figure out what feels natural and figure out how this is going to work.
Drive safe, man.
Okay, man. Thank you.
I'll see you on one of the
Zooms.
See you on a Zoom. Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, man. All right. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right, bye.
Hello.
Hi, Shelley Williams. It's Leo.
Hey, Leo. How are you?
I'm good. I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm breathing.
Yep, me too.
What has your last week looked like from a professional point of view?
Well, in the early part of last week, it started with getting a number of canceled gigs for things coming up in the next few months, which was not surprising. I was working on a lab for an upcoming production that I'm directing, and we were in the middle of the lab on Thursday when everything came to a halt.
Mm-hmm.
I had a number of people on Broadway, in my show. And it was a sobering moment. Not surprising, because obviously the NBA had canceled its season the night before. And so that was very telling. We knew it was really just a matter of hours before our industry would be next, since we do bring high concentrations of people together in a small room every evening.
Mm-hmm.
It often is for people, the place where they seek joy, the place where they escape. Theater's more than just entertainment, as you know. Same with music. It also is, it serves a mental health purpose.
Mm-hmm.
It serves a stimulation purpose, an escape purpose. And And I think, we're seeking that. We're going to be seeking that, more and more as this comes about, and for the thousands of people that are now out of work. We're also an extremely vulnerable industry. Mm-hmm. Some unions are stronger than others, but the actors right now, have no source of income. Mm-hmm. They're working on that, but they were not protected by an act of God clause, as it will, that some unions have protection for. So
you described the tension that I've just been feeling in general in the sort of creative community, which is both the intense need at this moment for a level of creativity and connection and community and communion, and that we as artists have a real responsibility in this moment to provide that for people. And on the other hand, we are among the most vulnerable in the society. And so there's this tension between doing what we do and providing the service not only for ourselves and our own community, but for the kind of culture at large, but also figuring out how are we going to survive, and is this the time to start already talking about charity or monetizing stuff online, or what the model is going to look like in the short term? It's like they're both happening at the same time.
I was talking with my husband about this, and I was like, the great boom for movie musicals and for film was the Depression. Yeah. People needed to escape so badly. The thing that I say to singers, a lot to singers and a lot to musicians when I'm working with them, is don't be afraid of the space. Because sometimes just a lot of noise and very fast movement doesn't necessarily mean that you're making music. And so I feel like in the same regard, we cannot be afraid of the space. I think we want so badly to fill it. And I think just taking a moment to pause and realize first what we need, how do we put the mask on ourselves? How do we use the unique gift that we have to heal ourselves before we think about, all the ways that we can be generous to others? Let's make sure that we are taking care of ourselves, taking care of our own community, and then as a community, how are we stepping out and then taking care of the broader community? But I think, so often we're always thinking about how can I be altruistic, and our mental health is suffering. So I think in this moment, just taking a little bit of a breath and reminding ourselves that we are forced to stand still, and that's okay. And then what do we do with that space? And what is the best, most realistic, and safest way that we can go about doing what we do as human beings, which is finding that connection by any means necessary.
So I suppose it's a little premature then to ask if you've thought about ways that you might try to do your work from this isolated space.
I've got 2 kids, so I've been thinking about creation from a very different space, because now I'm homeschooling, right?
Yep.
Today, I thought about today we went for an afternoon walk, but we were kind of aimless in our walk. And I was thinking about what are all the ways that I know that art can be helpful for my children in the ways that they can express themselves and how they're feeling, and also the community. So we today put a sign out on the gate in front of our house. We're going to leave a message every single day to people walking by, letting them know that they're not alone, that they're here. And so I keep finding ways to use creativity to connect. Maybe it doesn't mean that I'm directing a show from my living room.
Yes.
But I am trying to direct the human experience.
Yes.
And, I was going to reach out to you and other people that I know, that my friends' kids' parents, and say, hey, why don't you put an envelope in front of your gate? So when we walk, we can leave a note for you. And we have a place to go when we go on our walk. We can leave notes for our friends. And just there's so many ways to create that are maybe outside of your discipline, but your brain is always thinking about ways to make a connection.
Yes.
And I think that story is a story that I'm very interested in telling right now.
That's what makes this, in a kind of an odd way, an opportunity for all of us, right? To sort of reframe how we think about creativity and, like you say, directing life. A musician I spoke to last week said, as musicians, and I'm sure the same goes for actors and directors and creative people of all kinds, that we forget sometimes that the work isn't only, our work isn't only the work we get paid for. The fact that it's not a gig doesn't mean that it's not serious, important, creative work, whatever it is that you're working on.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I have so many friends that have been posting online that they've like pulled out instruments that they haven't played since high school. And I was like, if I could only find a French horn on eBay, I would love it. Like I played for like 2 years in high school. I'm like, now's my moment. Bring back the French horn. I'm doing it.
But on the other hand, I mean, I feel the same way. I have a lot of friends that are saying, this is our chance. We're going to finally do that record. We've been talking about this and that. But because we also both have inherited this kind of, well, not just the two of us, all of us have inherited the burden of homeschooling. I mean, it's not a particularly mellow time for me right now. So it's...
it's not.
It's like you want to believe that you've got all this space, and I think to some extent there is some space, but it's not obvious space.
Yeah. The thing that I realized, after a day was like, we all need time to ourselves.
Yeah.
You get cabin fever very quickly. I said to my husband yesterday, I looked at him straight in the eyes and I was like, I would have not survived in the 50s. Not at all. I've made my third meal in a row and I'm like, I'm good. he was like, I'm going to take over dinner. And I was like, that is a wise choice.
You're saying I would not have survived if the societal expectation of you was that you stay home and cook all the time?
Yes. If this was like my jam, this was like, I was like, this has alcohol like all over it.
Oh
like,
my God,
like,
yes.
This is not like the way that my brain is wired. I was like, yes, there is a very good reason why my soul was born when my soul was born. Like I was born in the 70s for a reason because, oh my goodness.
Well, so, I mean, not to get too cosmic about the whole thing, but if in fact we are sort of born at the right time, then it seems that we all, I mean, anybody who's alive right now was born at this time in which we were going to come into contact with a major shift in the way we live. Because I don't think we come out of this, no matter how long it lasts, 30 days or 6 months or whatever it is, and just go back to whatever was there before.
Yeah, I think we're going to be vulnerable, hopefully more prepared. But I think the idea of like planning like 30 years ahead, like all those kind of things, I think have shifted greatly. Yeah. And there's just like no way around it. So we have to accept that. It is. I'll tell you, there's certain things that I am, I'm just leaning into it. Yeah. I'm like, here we are. I'm going to get time with my children that I would not have had. And I chose to have them. So I'm going to choose to like really get to know them and create a world in which we're all growing. I like we have to, like, my human spirit is like, we will thrive. We will not give into this. Yes. We will figure this out. I haven't gone on many excursions. I put on a mask because thank God I had a friend that had one. I put on a mask and I went to the dollar store and I bought like a few things. But when I bought some index cards and I was like, 4 weeks from now, we're looking for an activity. We're all going to learn Spanish. I've wanted to do it for a very long time. Yep. And if we're there, guess what? We're going to start labeling everything in our house. And like the whole household is going to learn Spanish. Yeah. I'm like, that is a free activity we can do online. Yep. And if we get there, then we get there. Yep. And like, we will come out bilingual. Like, that's what will happen at the end of this. Yep. I refuse to be reckless in my behavior. So we will be inside. We will do safe excursions that are away from people, but we will thrive.
Do you think this will affect your work on the other side? Do you think this will affect the way you think about the kinds of projects you want to do or the way you approach them?
No. I mean, the way it'll affect my work is completely out of my control. Yeah. I mean, my projects are going forward, so I know that going into this. Yeah. I have that level of comfort, and I'm grateful for that 100%. But I made the shift a while ago. I don't do anything that I don't love. I don't do anything that I'm a subject that I'm not completely passionate about. And I don't work with people that I don't genuinely believe are really good people. Thankfully, I'm at a place in my career where those are decisions that I can make. So the kind of work that I do and the subjects that I choose to tell stories on, none of that's going to change. Yeah. I'm excited to continue to work during this period of time because there's a great deal of independent work that I can do at this time. But because I'm not under a deadline at this moment, I'm rolling with like learning how to be an educator to an 8 and 9-year-old
Yeah.
and how to structure, how to be creative within my gifts and allow my children to be creative and express themselves with their unique gifts and I keep thinking about like, the situation is not as dire, and it's probably a terrible analogy to make, and I'm not trying to analogize this in any way. But whenever I think about parenthood, like at its core, I think about the movie Life is Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking, like, long before I had kids, that no matter what the situation is, I'd want to be that kind of parent. I'd never want my kid to feel so scared or be so knowing that they have a fear that I can't protect them from.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I want to lie to them, but they don't really need to know like all the down and dirty of every single moment. If I can keep their life normal, if I can bring them joy, if I can keep them laughing. And this situation is nowhere even close to that. So I'm like, I got this. We're going to figure this out, and we're going to keep laughing, and we're going to keep our sanity, and we're going to have space to be sad when we need to be sad. But we're also going to find ways to rally.
Yeah.
They're okay to miss their friends. They're okay to be sad. We'll do everything we can to keep the electronic connections going in the ways that we can.
Mm-hmm.
But we're going to thrive, and we're going to laugh, and we're going to be closer when this is all done. Maybe
just in the sort of logistics of the way theater works, it's just such a long horizon that there are so many people that have stuff that they've been working on for years, and they know that in 18 months something's going to move forward with it or whatever, that like ultimately a shutdown of a month or 2 months or even 3 months doesn't necessarily derail the sort of timeline of the kinds of projects that you work on.
Yeah, my projects are like 7 and 10 years.
Right.
Like I've been working on Aida for 3 years now.
Right.
So like I'm like, yeah, we're still gonna go up in a year. I did an advertisement for the theater yesterday from my living room. Like but yes, it is a very different the way that my business works. I mean, but my heart is breaking for shows that were in their second and third preview.
Yes.
Shows that were just going into tech. I mean, I was in a rehearsal space with Sing Street, and Mrs. Doubtfire was in their third preview, and I was like chatting with those guys, and it is, and then there's shows that are never going to open.
Yeah.
Because that slot in the season is now gone.
Yes.
And all of those people who needed the insurance weeks, who were excited to play that role, I think about, some friends that have, Laura Benanti and other friends that have been like, hey, you're doing your high school show, sing your song, and post that, like, seeing where our dreams, if I hadn't performed in my high school show.
Yeah.
I don't know that I would have felt the admiration and the love and the joy of what it means to stand on that stage that propelled like all of my dreams to coming to New York.
Right.
It's a tough time to be in the precipice of a career or have that breakout moment, or my heart aches.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who are supposed to be going on, college tours and figuring out what they're doing next year, or figuring out, am I going to graduate in June? How does that work? I mean, my goodness.
I am in general incredibly impressed by the conversations I've had with people in the theater community, because it has inevitably and almost immediately kind of turned into a conversation about living an artful life, seeing this as an opportunity, knowing that this too shall pass. And it sort of makes me feel like it must be such an intense experience to sort of live your life in that world.
Well, I mean, in theater, we're 2 weeks away from from unemployment, right? We have a 2-week notice so like, you get a company meeting on a Tuesday and you get the word, or you read it online, God forbid, your show's closing.
Yeah.
We don't have, any kind of a guarantee of anything. So we sit in the joy while we have it. We continue to improve ourselves and seeking future opportunities, but we always know we're 2 weeks away from unemployment. That never goes away.
Yeah. And so that's in some ways a useful skill for navigating the uncertainty of life.
We're pretty nimble in that way.
Yeah. Thanks. Good luck. And stay in touch through this.
All right. Great talking with you, Leo.
You too. Be well.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Oh, please stay home. It's okay to be alone now.
Rob Jost.
I'm driving to BJ's right now in Connecticut,
To where?
BJ's Wholesale Club. It's like Costco, but I don't think they have BJ's in New York. I think they have Costco only in New York.
Yeah.
We're good on toilet paper, but there's a bunch of other things I need. Once I get to the parking lot, I can call you and take you off speaker, and that will sound better. But all right, yeah, BJ's is right here. So
Oh, great.
let me just pull in.
Yeah.
All right, pull in here and take you off speakerphone.
Yeah.
I hope I don't say anything I'm not supposed to say because there's some negotiations underway with the Broadway people. Being on theater committee, I know some things that I'm not supposed to say.
Okay. What can you say? I should preface this by saying, Rob Jost, you have been playing in a Broadway show regularly for a while, and you've been subbing and playing in different shows for a long time. What does it look like from your perspective right now?
Well, the Broadway League and the mayor really didn't want to shut down. I think they thought they could go with the show must go on mentality for a long period of time. The nail in the coffin was when a couple ushers fell ill in different theaters, and then they just knew it was there. I mean, the theater is perhaps the least ideal space to be hunkering down against coronavirus. Just everybody's right on top of each other, both the audience and the people working in the theater. So, I don't think any of us really felt we were going to be open much past last week, and it was no surprise when we closed.
Apart from the economics of just keeping the rent paid and the infrastructure around a show intact, which I think we don't know how the producers would handle, they're dealing with it. But I just also think about like all of the people behind the scenes in a show who are in a position right now where they have to figure something else out. Like you've left the city, you're out in your country house right now for the foreseeable future. But, some musicians, for example, who maybe don't have that kind of luxury are going to have to try to figure something else out and may not even be around if the show reopens and when it reopens.
Absolutely. And now that we're up here in Connecticut, it took a lot of effort to get up here because actually my wife has been experiencing symptoms that otherwise would be fairly benign, but nowadays we don't know what they are. She had a fever for a couple of days and now some tightness in her chest, and there's no test available, so we're fairly committed to. I'm going to wear a mask when I go into BJ's, so I don't, and gloves, so I don't risk anybody being in my presence. And my wife feels almost back to normal, and me and the kids feel great, but we could be carrying this disease. But what I was starting to say was my next project tomorrow was really going to be to check in with as many people as I can that I work with at the show and just see what everybody's plan is and how everyone is handling it. I think most of us are all just still in shock.
I'm sorry to hear that, and good luck, and I'll be thinking about you guys. The best case scenario for contracting the virus is that you spend a couple of days with a fever and tightness in your chest, and then it kind of goes away, and I hope that's, if she does have it, I hope that's what it is, and you too. In terms of talking to people in the show, you said there's a lot that you can't say. It does sound like there have been some sort of negotiations going on to try to protect musicians and performers. Does it seem like there's going to be some kind of safety net for people in the theater?
Well, we're lucky that all of these theater jobs, actually can't say all of them, but most of the theater jobs are represented by one union or another. I think there are 17 different unions represented in the theater community, 7 of them which fall under the IATSE rubric as that's changed over the years. And those unions work together to negotiate. So I know there are things that are happening underway right now, and I just hope for the best.
It's interesting because I think there are so many musicians. Rob, I mean, you live on both sides of the fence, right? I mean, I've known you to do plenty of work. Boy, I don't know if I should say this or not. You tell me if I am allowed to say this or not. I've known you to do plenty of work that is not in the union. So many singer-songwriter gigs and recording gigs, and just so much of the business of being a musician in New York is outside of the union. It just is. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that about you or not, but it's the case for me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's no secret anymore, and actually, people should know that about the union, that it's no longer a culture where we have to hide the fact that we do dark work it's understood that the union has lost huge swaths of work over the past 3 decades for one reason or another. You could talk to Lenny Pickett at length about how that's gone on. I know I've had some good conversations about that with him, and some of my other friends, like Tony Scher, have told me a lot of stories about the union's missteps in the 80s and 90s. Our current union administration and leadership, I'm very, very proud of. Adam Krauthammer is our president, and their initiatives going on with the union to try to bring more work back, but also just to communicate with musicians in all the fields. And this is right away just showing me the difference between union work and non-union work, because right away the union had been in touch with us to keep us informed, to keep us aware that they've got our backs. And for my non-union work, it's cricket. Like, I guess nothing's happening there, you know. It's like, so I think this is showing me, this is putting even more of a fire underneath me to, when things go back to normal, to work towards bringing more and more work back into the union, whatever way I can. Whether that means a digital tip bucket at Rockwood Music Hall that pays into health and pension, or there's so many little things that we could. And I actually ran into Ken Rockwood and floated that idea to him once, and he seemed enthusiastic about that idea. I think we've hit rock bottom as far as how much work is not in the union anymore, and it really is a place where we can go up from there big time. That's something I think a lot about these days.
First of all, there's a phrase buried in what you just said, which is when things get back to normal. And I think it's wonderful to hear you say those words, because I'm already kind of predicting the worst, which is, how do we get back to normal when we've shut down an economy that really is day to day and week to week for so many people that are not in the union? So, and like I started out by saying, you live on both sides of the fence. It's great to hear that there could be some protection for people that are in the union, and I understand that it's sort of underscored for you the need for the union to protect musicians. And what about all these cats that aren't in the union whose work is drying up and disappearing?
Well, yeah, it's a bloodbath, and so I guess, me personally, I am grateful that I am on both sides of it. That I have so many friends in the union and so many friends outside of the union, and maybe I can help to communicate things to them that they might not otherwise know. There are resources available at the union.
Yeah.
Just for example, I got a detailed email from the union about how to file for unemployment today. What other employers are sending that out?
Yep.
Well, they're not an employer, obviously, but it's just so I can communicate those things to my friends that aren't in the union. And I talk about union stuff a lot these days, and I feel like I have brought a lot of awareness towards union issues amongst my singer-songwriter, jazz-playing friends that have no reason to be in the union, because there's no union work there, or very little.
Over and over again, in sort of all walks of life, I think this experience is maybe going to give us the opportunity to reframe the way we think about a lot of things, the rights of all workers and all citizens to have access to health care. And so I suppose it shouldn't be surprising that it may reframe musicians' ideas about the union and finding some protection, and also hopefully consumers and audiences' relationship with the arts and understanding how volatile it is. But I also worry that the opposite may happen as well, and that the bottom could just totally fall out. I just don't know. I don't know what to feel.
Absolutely, Leo. It's yeah, you're right. I heard myself say when things get back to normal, and I wish I had more faith in that. I definitely I put down this book I was reading called The Iron Curtain, which is all about how Stalin strengthened his grip on so many Eastern European countries. And one of his biggest techniques was social isolation. making sure that not even a chess club could meet unless they were approved. So, yeah, I have my dark fears about things like that for sure. But then I'm also seeing the other side. My friend Justin Smith, the violinist at Van Hansen, I guess he goes to a world-renowned acupuncturist, and the acupuncturist told him this virus is an invitation from the earth. It's an invitation for massive social change for good. And so I'm trying to stay more on that side of the fence in my personal thinking these days, because that's what my kids need. And already, my kids are, I've never seen so much creativity from them on a daily basis. They're just running around, deepening their friendship with each other, doing all sorts of arts and crafts, making up stories, songs, and it's just lovely to be around them.
Thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Leo. Be well.
Be well. Bye-bye. All right, my friends, there it was. COVID Chronicles Volume 2. I'll be back again soon with another series of conversations and explorations into the world as we experience it today. I don't even know what the topic is anymore. I'm not sure what the theme is, but I'm just going after it. I'm going to go get it, whatever it is. I'll be back again soon with another episode. Until then, I'll talk to you soon.